You're listening to the Artistic Finance Podcast, Show 59. On today's show, I interview stage designer David Jacques. We talk about diversification within your financial portfolio and how David's is conservative as he nears retirement. We also discuss real estate within a portfolio and holding individual stocks, including a costly mistake David made during the pandemic. We also discuss purchases that don't make financial sense, but take advantage of the limited time we have on the planet. Without further ado, let's get to the interview.
You're listening to Artistic Finance Podcast, where your host, Ethan Steimel, interviews successful artists, leaders, and investors to help educate and inspire artists to grow their wealth.
Welcome, everyone, and a special welcome to my patrons. I'm your host, Ethan Steimel, and today I welcome David Jacques to the podcast.
It's good to be here. I'm barely awake. It's 8 o'clock in the morning in Los Angeles. I normally get up really early, actually, but usually around 5 or 6, because my dog is always hungry at that time. But yeah, I'm awake. I'm about ready to talk about money. Let's talk about some money.
Before we do that, I just want to mention that we're recording this on April 20th, 2021. So we're amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. We're amidst the Black Lives Matter slow burn across the world. And in the United States, there's an ongoing Stop Asian Hate campaign. So, David, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm a stage designer. I'm an educator. I'm a musician. I'm a composer. For people who listen to my podcast, you probably know all that already.
Light talk, just in case anybody doesn't know.
Oh yeah. I have this crazy podcast with my partners and Steve and Stan, who have already been on this show, by the way.
That's right. I finally now have all three.
Well, yeah, those two guys know how to deal with money. I'm like the person you do not want to listen to about money. So I got to give you a disclaimer. I'm going to tell you a lot of things today, but I'm not taking any responsibility for it. Seek a qualified, licensed financial planner before you take any of my advice. So anyway, that being said, I'm a educator, designer. I've been designing for over 40 years. I've worked for Disney. I've worked mostly in opera and musicals. I do large-scale operas and musical, and I do scenery and lighting and projections. I started out strictly as a lighting designer, but then when I went to SMU as a student, it's more of a scenography program. And also I had Bill and Jean Eckhart there teaching, so I'd say it'd be stupid for me not to take scenic and costume design with like two brilliant Broadway designers here. So I learned how to do that too. And now a lot of the stuff I do is I do scenery and lighting and projections. Also, I started out as a musician and a composer. My first job actually was playing in strip clubs at 15 years old back in 1970. And I made, believe it or not, $25 a night. Now, understand, in 1970, gas cost 29 cents a gallon. The frightening thing is that, I played all these years. I still play in clubs, usually jazz, blues, or whatever, big band stuff. I'm still making $25 a night. So I'm thinking to myself, I made more money playing, in strip clubs in 1970 than I make now. And so you really can't think of, it's sort of like any art, you're not going to get paid a lot of money unless you get into opera and musicals like I did, or Broadway, obviously, or commercial things, industrials, that sort of thing. If you want to be an artist, you got to realize that people are going to try to take advantage of you. So there you go.
And they will. Sometimes they get away with it and you get mad at yourself for letting that happen.
Because, we love the show, but we don't love the business. We're very creative beings, and we, really like to just focus all our energy on being creative and not worrying about contracts and things like that. But I always worried about that because my dad, he was a Depression baby. And he wasn't a baby. He was actually a young man, a teenager during the Depression. He lived through some horrible times. and he knew a lot of people whose lives were destroyed. So he actually instilled in me a very conservative sort of investment type of strategy, which I haven't followed all the time. We'll get into that probably a little later. It was always about safety and security. And this is something that as artists, we sometimes forget about. We forget about retirement. We don't realize that there's going to be a time when we're going to all stop working. And we could keep creating. We could paint and we could do stuff like that, but we're not going to be making money off of it. So it's really important that, we find these outlets. And I try to tell my students that it's really important to understand contracts and all that other stuff and to make sure that you've got some sort of financial plan to take care of yourself when you're old and gray like me. Or in my case, old and bald. So,
speaking of old and bald,
yeah,
could you describe your demographics for us?
I'm 65. I'm divorced, but with a great relationship with my ex. I'm a white male, Jewish, not practicing. Once I got bar mitzvah, my parents said, "Hey, once you get bar mitzvah, you can do whatever you want." I said, "Great! Where's my car?" Gas is only 29 cents. Give me a car, for God's sake.
All right, now your creative personality. What is a live event that you like to experience as an audience member?
Oh, my God. I love concerts. Don't get me wrong. I do love theater, but I like to move. And it's tough to stand up in the middle of a show and start screaming. I can never sit on the inside of a row of seats because I'm always afraid I'm going to just jump up in the middle of the show and start screaming. So I always have to have an aisle seat. Which is really interesting because, when I design a show, I'm right in the middle, but there's nobody around. But when the theater's packed, it's really tough. But yeah, I love concerts. I was fortunate because, growing up in the 70s, I got to see huge acts like Led Zeppelin and, Janis Joplin and just huge acts. And they were cheap. It was like $4 a ticket. Every Friday and Saturday night I went to a concert when I wasn't playing in clubs. Yeah.
All right. Your financial personality. Are you good or bad with money?
Well, I've been successful, and I've been unsuccessful. If you hear a strange noise in the background, it's my dog. She's like, she needs attention. I consider myself secure and happy. I did not follow my father's advice to the T, but I did enough of it so that I didn't squander it away. So, yeah, I guess I'm good. I'm secure. I'm happy. I buy whatever I want, and I don't worry about it. I like doing things myself, but I also like enjoying I spent a ridiculous amount of money on a car. I never thought I'd do something that stupid. That car has brought me so much joy. I can't even explain to you. It's how much joy it's brought me. And it's definitely a car that I'll keep for the rest of my life, which may not last that long.
Wait, your life or the car?
Well, my life, probably. I'll probably die. Well, the battery could completely crap out in 5 years, so we never know. But I could buy a new battery. It's a Tesla Model S. But it's a great car. It's a big car. I can put my dog in the back. She has a giant living room in the back of my car. It's unbelievably huge, the hatchback area. So anyway, so I went ahead and I bought something and I'm a very sort of impulsive person. So I didn't even look at the payments because the payments are ridiculous. What was even more ridiculous was the insurance. I didn't even check how much the insurance is going to cost me. And then I found out.
You found out after you had agreed to buy the car.
After I bought the car, I said, I gotta get this thing insured. And my insurance agent called me and she said, "Oh yeah, well your insurance is going from, $500 a year to $2,000 a year." So, whoa! But I found through Costco. Here's a little bit of advice, financial advice. Buy car insurance through Costco because my car insurance was cut in half through their insurance company. So check it out.
Now on to our topic for the day, which is diversification. Before we actually talk about it, I want you to tell us what your retirement plan is, because I feel like that's what we're going to be talking diversification within.
Okay, well, I've actually prepared.
Whoa!
First of all, let me tell you something, because this has to do with retirement and diversity. One thing, my dad was a cop. He was a New York police officer. And my mom was a cop too, which was really funny too. Both my parents are police officers at one time or another. But when my dad was a police officer, and it's still the case, the New York Police Department has this terrific pension plan. He basically was a mounted cop, on a horse, and he patrolled, down in Manhattan. And one day the horse slipped on ice and fell on my dad, and it broke his back. So he had to retire. But the great thing was that he had a pension. That was a pension for life. There aren't many pensions left out there, so I may have to explain to your listeners what a pension is. You put in a certain amount of money. And depending on, and it's a small amount, but your employer actually pays the majority of it on a monthly basis. And depending on how many years you work, it's sort of like Social Security, the amount of money you receive on a monthly pension goes up, 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 up. He was able to, even though he continued work, he sold real estate and stuff like that, he was collecting on his pension. And that was a guaranteed income for the rest of his life. Usually unionized organizations have pensions. Not all of them, but some of them do. And it's a great thing because it gives you guaranteed money along with your Social Security or anything else you have. So he always would tell me, get a job where there's a pension. I said, Dad, nobody has pensions anymore. I was also a designer and a musician. He said, how are you going to take care of yourself? How are you going to take care of yourself when you retire? You're making $25 a night in a strip club. What are you going to do with your life? Halfway through my life, I started to teach. And it wasn't something that I really said, from the very beginning, I want to be a teacher. Somebody actually recommended me to do this temporary job at University of Missouri, Kansas City, suggested that I would be a good teacher. And I don't know why they suggested that. And but to this day, I thank them because they called me and they said, hey, do you want to do this 1 year thing? And I said, sure. And I fell in love with it. I just love teaching. And then that was my second career. I was a designer and a teacher. And, they had like a 403B plan, which is a totally different thing. But it's great. It's, most of these universities have some sort of retirement plan. After I went there, I went to SMU, who had a great plan, by the way. And then I went from SMU to here, which is Cal State Long Beach, as part of the California state system. And they had a pension. They have 403B and a pension. And I realized that if I stayed here for like 20 years, I would make almost my full salary in retirement if I was the only dependent. The thing is, if I got married and I had a kid, I could name my kid as a dependent. And after I died, my kid would have that pension for the rest of his or her life. So it's really that, and it's through a company called CalPERS, CalPERS, which happens to be one of the largest investment organizations, definitely in the U.S. stock exchange. CalPERS has, because they not only deal with teachers, they deal with firefighters and police officers, things like that. So it's an amazing, huge pension program. I was fortunate that I actually fell into that job, and I told my dad when I got the job, and guess what? I got a pension. He was very happy because he thought I'd never have a pension. He says, yeah, but you should really check into that management training at Macy's. I hear it's the old Seinfeld thing. I said, Dad, I'm a teacher, Dad, I'm a tenured teacher. I'm a tenured teacher. I'm okay. I'm going to be fine. Don't worry about me. But anyway, so the pension. I also have a 403B. So, and that 403B is invested in the stock market. Partially now. I mean, and this is one of the points I'm sure that a lot of your guests make, is that you always have to reevaluate your investments as you grow older. When I first started, I did like a mix of 50% stocks or mutual funds. I'm not really good at picking individual stocks, which we can get into later, but I like mutual funds. And usually I do like a S&P 500 mutual fund and a NASDAQ fund. I like investing in new technology. And I found a fund early on in my investment life called Contra, Fidelity Contra. And I think Contra has been closed to new investors for some time. That actually has done very well for me. And I to this day, I have a lot of Contra.
So you said Contra is closed to new investors. Does that mean there was a certain level you were buying in at these mutual funds?
I had Contra when I first started. And that was way back in the 80s, I believe it was. But that's when I started Contra. And because I was already an investor in Contra, I had some stock. I could buy Contra in any sort of account that I had. I can add the Contra to this day, and I can buy $500 of it, and which I did yesterday. Whenever the market goes down, by the way, I always buy. That's when I buy. The days the market dumps 100 points, I buy $500 or something. I'm not really big into foreign stocks, and I have no reason. I just did not want to do the research. I guess I was lazy. So I did S&P 500, which is very easy. Tracks the S&P.
So wait, so you have the pension, but you're not collecting the pension until you retire, right?
We have a special deal at Cal State Long Beach, which makes this even better. You can set a retirement date, and then 5 years before that date, you can go ahead and start collecting your pension. At the same time, you're collecting your salary. Technically, I'm retired and I'm working as a professor emeritus half-time. So I only teach in the falls, and I get my full salary for that, for the fall semester, plus I get my pension.
So you get your pension, which you have no say in what it's invested in. It just gives you money.
Right.
And then, so then when you're talking about you have S&P and NASDAQ, is that in a brokerage account? Is that in a 403b?
Yes. It's in 403bs. It's in IRAs. Through the brokerage account. And I've always been with Fidelity. And I'm not saying Fidelity is the best. I'm sure there are other Schwab's probably great and a bunch of others. I just always felt comfortable with them. And when one of the pieces of advice I want to give to your listeners, take advantage of these companies. They will give you free financial advice. I mean, they'll meet with you, and you can, with a real actual person, and they will ask you, questions, and then they will give you some advice, and it's all for free. And I've always had good luck with Fidelity. But I'm not saying go to Fidelity. There are others that are just as good. So, and then also diversification. I did something, and something I always believed in because my dad sold real estate in his later years, and that is to invest in real estate. And I've always bought homes. And I bought a home in Miami, one in Orlando. I bought a home in Dallas, and I bought a home here. Now, I've sold those homes, but they've always appreciated. They appreciated greatly. The home I bought out here, and again, I live in California, and I live like 100 feet from the beach. So it's a pretty high area. And I always wanted to live in this one neighborhood called Belmont Shores, which is kind of a cool neighborhood. A lot of young people here. It's extremely diverse. As a matter of fact, Long Beach is probably one of the most diverse cities in the United States. And it's close to the university, so I can actually walk to the university or ride my bike or drive. I decided I wanted to buy out here, and I saved up all my money for the down payment. And I spent more money than I ever thought I'd ever spend on a house. And it was in 2001. My house cost $450,000 in 2001. That's a small house. It's a small beach house. It's like 1,500 square feet. The lots are very small. Typical California beach house, beach community. And my house is now worth about $1.4 million. And it's paid off. I paid it off this past year.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. So that mortgage, which I had, of course, refinanced because as the interest rates went down, you refinance. So this house is actually a big part of my net worth, and it gives me a lot of freedom as well. So real estate's great, but that's a whole nother discussion because I don't know if I would recommend buying real estate right now. I think that the homes are really super inflated because the interest rates are low, which is great, but everybody's jacking up their prices. Because I was thinking about buying a house up the coast in a little town called Cambria. Everything went up like 20% in a matter of a month at the beginning of this year. So I don't know. I'm just decided that, I'm going to keep my house and just rent places. Just, if I want to live someplace for 3 months, I'll just rent a place for 3 months.
I'm on board with it. I mean, you could also sell. I don't know how long you're going to live, but
maybe 20 more years, 30 more years.
But potentially you could sell and use that money to rent places, for 30 years.
Between my pension and then I'm still working. I'm still doing gigs. And my gigs, pay pretty well. Once they start again, like everyone else, all my gigs were canceled or postponed, but I still have one coming up in Colorado. I do Central City every year, and hopefully that's going to continue, but it looks like it is. And then, and I do a couple of shows in Italy next year. So, that's, and also one next year in Scandinavia. I'm doing a big world premiere in Scandinavia. So, that with my teaching, which I'll do for another 4 years. I've only just started this new early retirement thing. So I'm in good shape. I'm okay.
You have the home, which is paid off. You have the pension starting to filter in. So then all your brokerage and retirement accounts. So are you basically just in the S&P 500 and then that fund that I forgot, the Canva fund, Contra?
Yeah. Right now, I'm invested about 20% mutual funds, 30% bonds, and the rest is cash and liquid. And it's because, again, as your age changes, you want to be a little more secure. If CD rates were decent, I'd be in CDs. You know what I mean? That's just the way you got to do it. And actually, I am in some CDs, but I'm also in some high-paying money market funds through Fidelity. If you have a certain amount of money in Fidelity, it allows you to go to a little higher rate. It's not great. Don't get me wrong. It's not like you're getting 2%. You're getting. I think I'm getting like 0.4 instead of 0.2.
Yep.
Yeah. I needed some liquidity because I'm thinking about remodeling my house, actually, to tell you the truth. So I need a couple hundred to do that.
Oh, I forgot your age. Can you pull out of your retirement?
65.
65. So you can pull out of your retirement accounts now.
Oh, yeah, if I wanted to. I don't have to yet. But yeah, I could. But then you're taxed on them, because I only have a certain amount in Roth IRAs. Most of my stuff is in, taxable. They weren't tax deferred when I put into them, but now they're taxable.
Okay, so looking at your analysis, so you're half in cash, so that's like a steady amount of money. Like that amount of money can't go down except for however inflation works, that slow treadmill. And then your 30% bonds, that's incrementally growing in theory. That's also very stable. And then mutual funds are fairly stable. They sort of match the market, but hopefully outperform it a little bit. I would say it's a very stable portfolio.
It's conservative. It's a conservative portfolio. But again, this is sort of the financial advice I received from my advisor at Fidelity. And I started with this guy about 15 years ago. And, and it was totally different 15 years ago. I was much more heavily invested in mutual funds and very little cash. It was bonds, funds, and cash, but very little cash. Now it's, a lot of cash and 20% stocks or funds and 30% bonds.
Okay, here's a question that I think I'd never asked. So I just want to make sure we say it. What is diversification?
Well, what is diversity? It's a lot of people, interesting people of different colors and genders and persuasions and, and languages and countries and cultures. That's diversity. And it's the same thing with money. It's real estate. It's REITs, which are real estate investment trusts. There's mutual funds. There's cash. There's gold.
Bitcoin now,
and then there was Bitcoin too, right?
but what is the purpose of diversification?
So you're protected. You're spreading out your risk, and I think that's always a good thing because let me tell you something. There's one thing that I really learned in my investment life, and that is I am not made out for individual stocks, right? If I buy an individual stock, I'm constantly looking at it. I'm constantly worried when it drops, and I do something stupid. I'm impulsive, right? I know that about myself. So some of my biggest mistakes in my financial life were investing in individual stocks, and then I panic and I get out, and then it goes up. I think it was last year. Yeah, it's so hard. I try to wipe 2020 out of my mind. Such a horrible year for everybody. But I invested in a little company called Tesla. At the time, Tesla was selling for about, I think it was $380. I bought a bunch of it. And And then Elon Musk decides to smoke pot on a radio show, on a podcast or TV, right? And then started to screw around with the FEC, and then the stock starts plummeting. One bit of advice I always believed in, people who always told me, is that buy stock in companies you believe in, and something they make a product that you love and you believe in that company. And it went down to 310, I think it was. And I panicked and I sold, right? So I lost, a significant amount of money. Tesla today has split, I believe, and I think it's selling for like
$720.
Thank you so much. $720 after the split or something like that. Or maybe it has a split. But still $720. I bought it at $380. I would have that's double. I would have doubled my money, right? Had I waited. Yep. Had I just sat there, But I'm just not good. So people who have that type of personality like mine, you do not want to buy individual stocks. You want to buy mutual funds and let professionals invest in individual stocks in those funds. That's the thing. Now, on the other side, many years ago, like 30 years ago, I bought a little upcoming company in Austin called Dell, Dell. They make computers. And I did very well on Dell. Dell only went up. Had Dell started to crash, I probably would have sold that too. So yeah, that's my advice.
Well, okay, that's really good, because what you said earlier, which is like, call Fidelity and they'll talk to you for free. And then you could call Schwab and talk to them for free. And chances are they're probably going to say roughly the same thing.
Right.
But yeah, you can talk to people and get their advice. But what they will say to you is, you don't want to have any individual stocks.
Yep.
Part of that is because people are tempted to go in and out of them because that's easy to do.
Right.
The other thing is they're more volatile.
Yep.
Financial advisors will always say, you want to be diversified, you want to do mutual funds, ETFs, because yes, they sync with the market, they go up with the market, but not nearly as much as an individual stock will. The S&P is not going to go from 380 to 310 like Tesla did.
Right.
Yeah, it'll go down from 380 to 360 maybe in a really bad moment, but that's not nearly as bad as going down, 30%.
It's totally irrational. What I did was totally irrational. You think I would have learned my lesson, but no, I don't have any individual stocks anymore.
You keep saying mutual funds. So the thing nowadays is ETFs. Is that interchangeable with ETF, or are you saying mutual fund versus ETF?
No, I'm not saying versus. I have some ETFs as well. Because ETFs are kind of sector sort of things. I guess, when it comes down to it, they're the same thing.
Yeah, well, yeah, the only difference is, in theory, that mutual funds are managed, so people are rebalancing all the time.
Right.
And ETFs are just passive, so they just buy the S&P 500, and then maybe every year they'll rebalance a little bit to get to their percentages, but mostly it's set and forget. No one's actively managing it.
That's the great thing about mutual funds, especially the S&P type of index funds, is that their cost is low. And when we talk about cost, is that there's a management fee that's usually 0.5% or 1% that goes to management of the funds.
You're paying that because they're actively managing those. So they're doing work.
That's right.
And there's an office and accountants and all that, and they have to pay all those people to work. So that's what you're paying the fee for. And the fee is low, but when you take a 1% fee and then compare that mutual fund to an ETF that has a 0.1% fee, over time, that can save you a lot of money.
Right. Yeah, you're saving a lot of money.
And so the general zeitgeist of the last, let's say, 20 years has been ETFs are better because of the low-cost fees and their performance compared to mutual funds. But there is an argument for mutual funds, which is when things crash and things go down, they won't necessarily go as far down. So there is an argument for either or.
Well, I kind of like to have somebody watching because, still when the pandemic happened and everything dumped, I mean, I was scared. I was scared, and I actually did liquefy a lot of my stuff then, and then I put money back in. So it's a weird thing. It's nice to know that I was still protected in a lot of ways. But yeah, my overall value went down about 20%. And I'm close to retirement age. So I got a little worried, because I have plans and things like that I really needed the money for. So anyway, it's I felt good with the way my mutual funds survived that. they actually did pretty well.
The point of diversification is a risk management thing, so that
Absolutely.
in theory, if one sector goes down, like if the S&P 500 goes down, well, you have cash, which didn't go down at all, or you have bonds, which didn't go down at all. And then there's another argument for it that says it also helps you grow faster or higher. Like if you look up an article on diversification, like what is it? It says, oh, well, it's to protect your downside, and it also makes for growing your upside. That's not how I see it. I see it more as a defensive measure. Because in theory, if you just went all in on Tesla and no other stock or anything, and you didn't diversify at all, you would have way more money
Oh my God.
than somebody that has mutual funds or ETFs.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it would be a wild ride.
But you got to get lucky. I mean, really. I mean, seriously. I mean, nothing against Elon Musk. I love Elon Musk. But would you bet your entire financial security on Elon Musk? The guy is. I mean, he's pretty erratic. I mean, he almost went to prison. I am not a risk taker like that. I'm just not.
Okay. Also, there's another word that we didn't talk about, but I want to mention, which is hedging. You have a portfolio and let's say you have a hunch, you have a certain idea. You take a little bit and you do the exact opposite of what your hunch is. And that's just to say, like, if you're wrong.
Well, that's what Contra does, by the way. It's a contrarian type of fund. But, I'm looking at what they're investing in. It's pretty much, I guess, it's pretty much like NASDAQ, stuff that I like. I don't do the opposite, and maybe I should do the opposite. It's like that old Seinfeld where George Costanza decides to do opposite of all of his instincts, and he becomes extremely successful. Because, if indeed everything you decide to do is wrong, then if you do the opposite, it's probably going to be right.
It's like, even if you disagree with Bitcoin and you're like, no, it's never going to replace the US dollar, it's in a bubble, blah, blah, blah. Even if you think all that, it wouldn't be the worst thing to hedge a bet and get a little bit of Bitcoin, just in case you're wrong.
It's whatever your personality is and how much of a risk taker you are. And how conservative you are, like you're saying with hedging, that could be a very conservative strategy just to protect from your instincts. Maybe I should have done that. When it came to Tesla, I just said, just let it go, man, let it go.
Nobody knows what companies are going to do well. Nobody necessarily knew that Tesla or Apple or Dell were going to be rock stars. But there's an argument that if you're diversified and you just have like 1% of them, then that 1% is going to grow to a huger portion. If you went back in time, you'd be like, oh, I put it all in Apple. No, you wouldn't. You'd put like 1% in Apple, but that 1% would become a giant part of your portfolio and you'd do really well without having to be reliant on just that one thing.
That was also another stock that I sold that I regret. I had a lot of Apple.
Okay, so you have mutual funds and bonds and cash. That's a conservative diversified portfolio.
And real estate.
Oh, and real estate. You're only real estate in your home, right? You're not in REITs?
I don't have any REITs, but I think your home is a huge asset. For instance, although I don't really believe in them, some people like reverse mortgages. I'll probably never have to use that, but for some people, it has helped them in their retirement ages.
What is a reverse mortgage?
Again, I am not an expert, so do not take this and don't say, and I am not saying you should do this.
Nobody has ever tuned into this podcast to hear an expert.
Okay, that's good to know. You may be getting one with Ethan, but you're not getting it with me.
You are not getting one with me. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're not getting one with me.
Okay, so Ethan just threw his disclaimer out there. That's good. You know what, Ethan, you're actually, living on the edge having this podcast because it's, this is pretty heavy stuff. We don't talk about anything this substantial on Light Talk.
You touch on a lot of businessy things every episode.
Yeah, but nothing that's going to ruin your life.
I'm not out to ruin people's lives.
No, you're not out to it, but it could, Say, well, Ethan said I should, do a reverse mortgage.
Go all in Tesla.
And then own Teslas, So, anyway, reverse mortgages. It basically, you're taking out a loan against your house in a way, and they're paying you. They're actually paying you a monthly fee, but they're getting a part of your house.
So they're slowly buying the house off of you.
Yeah, that's the simplest way of looking at it. For some people who have no life savings, but they do have their house and they want to do things like go on cruises, and they could actually use that. Or you could just remortgage your home and just use the cash.
That's another thing is we had one episode on real estate. We're going to have another, and I guarantee we'll have more than that. But there's so many different things, like reverse mortgage. That's never something that I had thought about. But there's so many things you can do that if you own the home, if you have the equity in the home, you can remortgage, you can reverse mortgage, you can sell the place, you could Airbnb the place, you could rent out the place. It's just such a crazy topic, but it should be part of a portfolio, I think.
Right.
So you're diversified. If mutual fund, so a mutual fund is just a bunch of different companies. If you just bought one mutual fund and got rid of your cash and got rid of your bonds and just bought a mutual fund, one of them, wouldn't that be diversified automatically?
Yeah, it depends on the mutual fund how diversified it would be. There are some terrific mutual funds that are extremely diversified. Their investment strategies are designed around your retirement age. Fidelity has something like called the 2020, the 2030, the 2040, the 2050. If when I retire is going to be in 2040, join that fund, and that fund will do a whole diversified investment strategy that is relatively safe, because it's coming up. Actually, 2030 would be really safe. 2020 already happened, so 2030 would be really safe right now. So it'd be very conservative. But if it's like 2060, if you're a young artist and you wanted to start, you'd say, okay, let's look 30 years in advance, and that's going to be 2040 or 2050 or 2020, whatever. That's when I'm going to retire, and you buy that mutual fund, and that mutual fund will be automatically diversified and will actually be rebalancing as the years go by. But it makes it real simple.
Yeah, those are called target date funds.
Yes.
And it's an excellent choice because I'm always encouraging people to save and invest. People say, well, I don't know what to invest in. David told you that you can go talk to a company and they will give you free advice. So there's that option. 2, you can look it up for yourself. 3, what I always say, which is just stick it in an S&P 500 index. Or what you're saying, a target date fund. That's a way to just saying, when am I going to retire? And then just put all your money in there, and they're automatically diversifying it into stocks and bonds and cash for you. If you were in a 2020 target date fund right before the pandemic last year, you were probably really good because they probably had that mostly in cash, mostly in bonds. And so it probably did not sink nearly as much as the 2060 one.
Probably not. I don't know. I haven't looked at the history and the performance because I'm actually not in any of those target date funds. That's not because I don't like them, but I believe what you said. I believe in an S&P 500 type of fund. That's all I have now, that and the Contra. And I have some bond funds as well. But yeah, it's a pretty conservative thing, and you diversifying is very important. If you're looking at funds, look at the cost. It's very important that you look at the cost, the management cost of them, because you don't want to get into anything that has a high fee, all right? Because you're losing money when you do that. That's why I like the S&P 500s, because usually the costs are very low.
Yeah, and that's something. If you're going to pick a fund, I heard about these target date funds. I'm going to put all my money into this one because I'm going to retire in 2060. I'm going to put it in the 2060 retirement fund. You can type into your search bar on the internet and say lowest cost target date funds. And that more than likely will pop up an article that says the 5 or 10 lowest cost target date funds. And then you can compare for yourself. So if you're going to go into something like an S&P 500 ETF, you can look and just say, what are the lowest fees of those?
That's right.
So there's diversification across asset classes, which right now for you is real estate through your home, cash, bonds, and mutual funds, which is stocks. Commodities, we didn't mention.
I'm not into them.
That would be like gold or silver or Bitcoin.
My brain hits over, it reaches a saturation point. Yeah, I was never into gold. I was tempted. I understood it, I guess, and all that. But I think the commercials turned me off.
Yep.
I'm like, I'm not going to screw around with it.
But gold or commodities, even renewable energy, but commodities, those are hedges. So like real estate, the idea of diversifying is that real estate is not going to go to the whims of the stock market. And the same thing with commodities. It's like, well, the stocks might drop, but gold is still valuable. So it's probably going to go up when the stock market drops. That's the idea of diversifying over asset classes. There's more to diversification, which you touched on earlier, diversifying outside of your home country. So we're in the United States. Your mutual funds are all in the United States and your bonds. You said you don't do anything in the global stock market or the emerging markets?
I used to have a bunch, but I've taken them out over the years.
And is that just because of volatility?
Yeah, I got very, very conservative. I mean, I got a crazy amount of liquid investments right now. I'm playing it really super safe, especially nowadays. this pandemic could turn, not to be a Debbie Downer. It could get worse. The market's going up right now. That's great. I've got 20% in the market. It's terrific. I'm happy with 20. I'm not, kicking myself because I don't have 80%. But to me, I'm not going to chance and risk a total breakdown, if something should happen, like a new strain comes up and we're not going to have a recovery. And if that, occurs, I just, it's going to be a problem. So I'd rather not deal with it. If I was young, though, if I was your age, yeah, absolutely. I'd be heavily invested into it because you have time to recover. God forbid something should happen. I don't have that time anymore.
All right, so rebalancing, that's part of diversifying. What is rebalancing? And throughout your career, how often have you rebalanced things, or have you?
Oh, yeah, I rebalance. I always meet with my Fidelity person at least once a year, and my advisor. And we actually had this plan many years ago. And also when my mom, retired, my mom was getting up there and she had to make some financial decisions. After my father passed away, I was doing it for my mother. So I was dealing with my mother's estate as well, which wasn't a lot of money, but we wanted to make sure that she was going to be taken care of. And a lot of the decisions I made had to do with, taking care of mom. Things changed at that point, but we sort of looked ahead. Because I had a good advice. He said, okay, this is great. You're set, but what about your parents? Can you take care of your parents when they need you to take care of them? And I said, wow, you're right, And to give them credit, they were pretty good with their investments. They were very conservative. And like I said, my dad had his pension. So they weren't in debt. They had a decent savings amount. But you never know with health issues and things like that, how much that's going to take away from that. So, so I started to diversify more when that was happening. Sometimes once, sometimes twice, always at least once a year. And we rebalance it. But we pretty much stayed on track. Now, when the market started to crash last year, of course, this guy was saying, hang on, it's going to be okay, And I was like, wait a second.
Don't sell out of Tesla.
Don't sell, yeah, but that was too late. He said, what the hell did you do? You sold Tesla at 310? You're going to regret this in a year. I'm telling you that right now. And of course, he was right. So anyway.
All right. So I think we've done a good explanation of diversification, how you diversify in your retirement accounts and your planning. So last question about diversification. How important is it? Do we need to diversify, or is this something I don't really need to worry about?
No, you need to diversify from the very beginning. It just depends on how much you want to diversify, Because you're a young man, you have time to recover. I would take much more risk. I would invest in individual stocks unless you had fun money. If you're really into investing and you want to have some fun, you like to live on the edge and have pain and pleasure. If there's a company you believe in, then invest in that company. Support that company. You like their product. You like, maybe it's their environmental policy. That's one of the reasons why I invested in Tesla, because I believe in alternative fuels. And I wanted to see an American company, and Tesla is an American company. I wanted to see that company succeed in a very, very competitive world of electric cars. And I believed in it. I believed in the company, and then I realized how crazy their CEO was, and I said, "Oh, maybe I shouldn't have so much money invested in them." But again, that was impulsive, and that was a mistake. Believe in the company. There was another I believed in Dell. I did believe in Dell because, again, when they came out, you had Apple, you had Compaq, you had IBM, and then Dell was really the first real computer you could actually specify. You could actually go ahead and design the way you wanted to design it. And I liked that idea. Plus, that too was an American company. It was in Austin, Texas, and I believed in it. If you find a company that has a product you believe in, absolutely, have some fun. Don't panic.
Don't panic. That does it for diversification. What financial advice would you give to yourself back when you started your career?
I saved money. I always believed in saving money, and I got into the market early. My very first lighting job, was at the Miami Opera, and I was a staff member there. And I started to invest because my brother was really into the market, and he basically taught me how to do it. I continued investing through the years, and when I worked for Disney, I put money aside, and I always invested, always. Even if it's like $10 a week, it doesn't matter. Get into the habit. That $10 a week will grow to a lot of money in like 30 years. And just throw it into an account. Just say, okay, $10 is going into, or $50, whatever you can afford, throw it into a mutual fund. And I did. That's what I did. And that's why I've been financially independent for so many years. And why I've been able to continue my job in, as a lighting designer. Because even when I worked full time as a lighting designer, and I was designing like 15 shows a year, it was still not a lot of money. That doesn't pay that much. Not until you reach a point in your career, like fortunately I've reached now, where I get decent fees. For most people, it is not a high paying thing. And also, I was wise enough to fall in love with teaching. Being part of a university, you have a steady paycheck and you have some sort of retirement plan. That helps as well. The other thing is, I jokingly say this, there's so much pleasure in having children, but I didn't have any children. And children are very expensive. So, yes, I've missed out. I've missed out on the pleasures of being a father. But I get enough of it with my niece and nephew. And
who can you adopt? Because you have that pension that you can give to a kid, right?
Too late.
Oh, you missed
I
it.
actually thinking about doing it, but I was I wasn't married at the time. There was no way I could do it as a single man. And then, it would have been great. It would have been great. But what can you do? That's the way life is.
Yeah, exactly. You sold Tesla. You didn't adopt someone. It's fine. Nice. Is there a book or a resource that has helped you with finances at all?
I saw that in that list. And yes, there was a book that I read a long, long time ago when I first started this. And it was called How to Pay Zero Taxes. And it had a lot of good advice for people like me, who was an independent contractor at the time. Let's be clear. I do not pay zero taxes. I pay a lot of money in taxes. However, this book told me I could be accidentally paying more in taxes by not taking advantage of the tax laws and understanding what you can legally deduct from your taxes. It's amazing how few artists understand, deductions and, as what you can take as an independent contractor. It's crazy. For the past year, I've been talking on our show about the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, which is basically free money for independent contractors. It's a loan. It's set out as a loan, but it's a forgivable loan. I know nobody who has not had that loan forgiven because if you just follow the rules, it could help you out. It's money that will help people who really need it. They lost all their jobs and they don't have teaching jobs to fall back on. And I think the PPP is a wonderful program for our colleagues. So that's why I talk about it all the time and say, there's a deadline coming up, so make sure you get it in before then. I'm not working for any banks or anything like that. I'm doing this as a public service. So, I highly recommend you looking at disaster loans, economic disaster loans through the Small Business Administration. You got to take advantage of everything that's out there, just for your own survival.
So I think you just answered this question. What can we do to stress the importance of finance and savings to our fellow artists?
At the beginning of this conversation, I talked a lot about the Depression and what my dad went through. It changed his life. It really did. I think my dad was a lot more reckless and a lot more impulsive before this giant thing happened in his life. COVID has done the same thing for this generation, especially for our colleagues who've lost all their gigs. And I think all of a sudden it's a wake-up call. I know my students are much more aware how insecure things can get. I teach at a university that the demographic of the university is usually middle to lower income families, students. Many of our students work full-time jobs and go to the university, and some of them are supporting their parents. It's really tough. They're in real tough financial straits, and when they see a worldwide pandemic completely changing the world and questioning their future. You got to pivot. You got to figure out a way that you're going to survive. In the 80s, we went through a recession, a severe recession. I lost all my gigs, very similar to what just happened last year. All my gigs were canceled. I had to make money, so I got a real estate license and I sold real estate for like a year just to survive. People are realizing now, just through the pandemic, how important it is to save and to have some sort of a financial cushion just in case, these horrible things happen. And they will continue to happen. Who knows what it'll be tomorrow or 10 years from now. But you just want to be prepared.
Second to last question. What separates those that have a full-time career in the arts from those that transition out or never give it a try?
I think a lot of it has to do with passion. We talk about this on our show a lot. It has to do with passion and finding what makes you happy. If theater, painting, or whatever, or composing makes you happy, that's what you should do. And that's what you're going to do. And that's, I think, what separates the people who are survivors and the people who just give it up. And there's nothing wrong with that. And people's passions change. I mean, people discover new things. People fall out of love with things, and that's okay. That doesn't make you less of a human being. It makes you a growing human, an evolving human being. Someone who can adapt. I think that's good. It's funny, we're having Bob Bonyol on our show this week. He's pivoted amazingly. I mean, it's amazing what he's doing right now, and it was all because of the pandemic. People, should be facile and be able to do stuff like that. Being a lighting designer, it's sort of like being an actor. It's a highly competitive industry. I think that's the difference.
I like that too, because I heard recently somebody put it, they said like, oh, your 20s. Okay, you can do that in your 20s. But then, hey, your 30s. You could do something completely different in your 30s. And that's 10 years.
Absolutely.
And then you get to your 40s, you could do something completely different for 10 years.
And I think that's a really good way to live life. And look, we're only on this earth for a limited number of years, you know what I mean? So you need to enjoy yourself. And that's, one of the reasons why I bought that silly car. I mean, yeah, that was a big chunk out of my savings. Absolutely. But I'm saying, look, you got to enjoy yourself. You got to do something. I like fast cars. I put my dog in the back and I drive up the coast of California all the way up to Washington. I can't tell you how joyous that was. So I think you just need to find what your bliss is. You got to find what your bliss is, and you got to just revel in it and enjoy it and grow in it.
All right, last question. Where can people find out more about you?
I got a website. It's called davidmartinjacques.com. And you spell my last name, Jacques. So you can find out a lot about my shows, what's coming up. Or you can listen to Light Talk.
Yeah, that's the second best podcast in the world after Artistic Finance.
It's the second best podcast in the world. Oh, congratulations. I saw that you had like 11,000 downloads or something like that?
Yeah, I'm at 11,000.
That's fantastic. I think that's a beautiful thing, Ethan, what you're doing. I think this is a great service because we're not great financial people, like I said in the beginning. We need help. And I think the more people you bring on and the more different, divergent, and diverse views you hear, the more you're going to learn about your own self and discover your own investment strategies.
All right. Well, David, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
It was my pleasure.
That was our episode on diversification. My takeaways were: diversification is key to reducing risk in your portfolio. How you diversify is up to your risk tolerance and personality. It's important to save steadily. Whether you're making a lot or not, start early and keep adding to your investments. Don't own individual stocks if you can't handle the volatility, and don't be afraid to invest in a company if you believe in them long term. In our patron-only episode, we discuss more Tesla, learn a bit more about David, and talk about the directors that David has worked with. To access that, go to patreon.com/artisticfinance. Patrons at all levels get early access to episodes, the extended interviews, and a private podcast feed. Patrons are also my favorite people in the whole wide world, so thank you in advance for supporting me and the show. Thank you to everybody who tuned in for our live episode, the Artistic Finance 6K. I'm looking forward to providing quarterly updates, and I'm also looking forward to the individual episodes where we dive deep into each specific asset class. In a year's time, we'll see how well diversified our artistic finance portfolio is, and we'll see if one thing hedged against anything else. If you're going to miss these episodes coming every week, I understand. You can always help me get to 50 patrons by becoming one or encouraging other people to do so. If you have any ideas for finding sponsors or monetizing the podcast in a way that I could return to weekly releases, please let me know. While the content is valuable and I want more of it out in the world, each episode takes a lot to put together, especially when I do the bilingual episodes that are double the work. That's all I have for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you for listening to Artistic Finance. Make sure to subscribe. To access our show notes, transcripts, or resources, go to artisticfinance.com. This show is for entertainment purposes only. Before making any decision, consult a professional. This show is copyrighted by Artistic Finance. Written permission must be granted before syndication or rebroadcasting.